So more information about the nucleic acid structure. We are actually doing about the structure of DNA. Now one or two things I have missed out during these last two video lectures, that is your Chargaff's rule of DNA composition. I have said them, but I have not mentioned that it was actually proved by Erwin Chargaff. So Erwin Chargaff, in late 1940s, he have quantitatively analyzed the DNA hydrolysates from different species. So he have hydrolyzed the DNA, broke the DNA into two strands, and have analyzed in different species. And he have observed that in all the species, DNA have equal number of adenine and thymine residues and equal number of guanine and cytosine residues. So when he had hydrolyzed the DNA in different species, he have observed a common thing in them. The number of adenines present in the DNA is same to the number of thymines, and number of guanine is same to in case of number of cytosines, and this is known as the Chargaff's rule, or it is also known as the Chargaff's rule of molar equivalence between purines and pyrimidines in DNA. Okay, so this theory of Erwin Chargaff, that the amount of purines present in the DNA is equal to the amount of pyrimidines in the DNA. This theory of Erwin Chargaff was not immediately realized because there are some exceptions to this Chargaff's rule. Like for example, the single-stranded RNA do not follow the Chargaff's law. They do not follow the Chargaff's rule. Then the genetic material in virus, which is actually double-stranded RNA, they also do not satisfy the Chargaff rule. That's why the Chargaff rule has not been accepted worldwide previously. Okay, so this was about the Chargaff's rule. Next, I will discuss about the Watson and Crick model, and that is the structure that I have mentioned with you all in the last two videos about the DNA double helical structure. Actually, James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953 have demonstrated the model of DNA. Now the DNA that they have studied was about the BDNA model. BDNA. There are also other two types of DNA like aDNA, zDNA, etc. And what they have proposed, what they have mentioned in this DNA model that I have already discussed with you, still I will try to discuss with you now also little bit. So let us move to the next image. So this is the structure of DNA as you can see in this figure, and in this figure you can see the two strands as denoted by the pink and black color represents the backbone of the DNA, and it is made up of sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate backbone. And the nitrogenous bases, which are the adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine in DNA, they are all protrude inside, and they base pair with the nitrogenous base of the opposite strand. Like for example, you can see the adenine here is base pairing with the thymine in the opposite strand, and guanine is base pairing with the cytosine in the opposite strand. So this is the second thing you can see. The third thing that you can see, that there is a presence of minor groove and the major groove. Minor groove is the places where the two strands are close together, whereas the major groove are the places where the two strands, the backbone of the two strands, are far apart. Now it is this place where your all proteins can able to interact with them. Okay, this is the place where proteins can able to interact with them and can able to regulate the gene expression, the DNA expression, that is your transcription, translation, not translation, transcription, replication. Okay, and all the other regulatory pathways of gene expression. Okay, then you can see that the length of one turn of DNA, one turn of DNA is about 34 angstrom, or you can say 3.4 nanometer. Okay, and each turn of in DNA involve 10 base pairs. So 10 base pairs are involved in per turn of DNA. Okay, so the distance between one base pair with the other base pair is 0.34 nanometer or 3.4 angstrom, and 10 base pairs are involved in per turn. You can see. So this was what Watson and Crick have said, and they have a directionality, they have a polarity, the 5' end region and 3' end region. Okay, so I have discussed with you all before. So what it is saying, now this is showing a step ladder model of DNA, the next figure. Okay, so the first they have said that DNA is a right-handed double helix according to the axis. If you observe according to the axis, DNA is a right-handed, but you can see I have already discussed with you that ZDNA is left-handed. Okay, so DNA is a right-handed double axis. It consists of two polydeoxyribonucleotide chains, which are the strands that makes the strands of the DNA, and they are twisting around each other in a common axis. Okay, so this is the first point that described by Watson and Crick. What's about the second point? The two strands are anti-parallel with each other. That is, one strand is running from 5' to 3' direction, while the opposite strand is running from 3' to 5' direction. Okay, so they are opposite, they are anti-parallel with each other. Okay, so it's just, you can compare them to two parallel adjacent roads which are carrying the traffic in the opposite direction, one for going, one for entry, one for exit, just like that. The width or diameter of this double helical DNA is 2 nanometer, or you can say 20 angstrom, and each turn, or we say pitch, pitch, we say pitch of the DNA, each turn of this DNA of this helix is about 34 angstrom, and that means 3.4 nanometer, and within each turn 10 base pairs of nucleotides are involved, and you can see that each strand has a hydrophilic deoxyribose phosphate backbone on the outside, and while the hydrophobic bases are stacked inside. The backbone composed of the phosphate and sugar, while inside we got the nitrogenous bases stacked inside. The two polynucleotide chains are not identical with each other at the same position, but they are complementary with each other, trying to base pair with the help of hydrogen bonds. Like we know that adenine always pair with thymine with 2 hydrogen bonds, and guanine base pair with cytosine by 3 hydrogen bonds. So the GC bonds are quite stronger than AT base pairing. So those DNA which have more GC bonds, they are quite requiring more temperature to break them apart, which we will discuss them later on, the melting temperature. So this figure I have already discussed with you with my handwritten notes about the base pairing rule of the adenine and thymine, and with the base pairing concept of guanine and cytosine. They have not shown the numbering at which position they are forming the hydrogen bonds, the hydrogen acceptor, the hydrogen donor. Okay, they have not shown. Next, it is saying that the hydrogen bonds are formed between purine and pyrimidine only. It's not like that the two purines are involved in hydrogen bond formation and they bind, or two pyrimidines, so they are not involved. They are only a purine and pyrimidine will be involved in hydrogen bond formation. If the two purines face each other, they will be not allowed to fit in the space, because two purines are two ring structures. It is impossible to fit two purines in one area. Okay, in a particular plane, and if two pyrimidines are involved, they are impossible to form hydrogen bonds with each other because they are too far away. So that's why a purine and a pyrimidines are involved for formation of hydrogen bonds. Okay, and the complementary base pairing of the DNA, it proves the Chargaff's rule. So somehow after the work done by James Watson and Francis Crick, they have proved the work Chargaff's rule, and they are from there the Chargaff's rule come into attention from by the scientists, that the complementary base pairing concept are proving the Chargaff's rule, that is the amount of adenine present in the DNA is equal to the amount of thymine, and the amount of guanine is equal to the amount of cytosine, and vice versa. And the genetic information is located. Now we can get confused that which of the strand contain genetic information. Out of these two strands that make up the DNA, one of the strand known as template strand carries that genetic information, while the opposite strand is called antisense strand. So the sense strand or the template strand is that strand that will carries the genetic information, while the opposite strand is called antisense strand that does not carry genetic information. Okay, and DNA consists of a major groove and minor groove along with a phosphodiester backbone. Proteins, different types of proteins, they interact with this major groove and minor groove without disrupting the base pairs, because at the major groove the two phosphodiester bonds are quite far away from each other, so it's easy become accessible for the proteins to interact with the bases and carries out their regulation. Okay, now there are various conformations of the DNA, like I have said that Watson and Crick have only showed a bDNA structure, but there are also other types of DNA as well. So the double helical structure of DNA exists in 6 different forms. Okay, so there are about 6 different types of DNA conformation from A to E and Z. So from A to E is the 5 types and Z, and among these the 3 types of DNA are normally come into attention, that is B form, Z form and A form. So I will show you the table. Let us move to the table now. You can see the table and you can able to observe that the diameter, then the distance between each turn, then what is the rise in base pair, what are the number of base involved in per turn of the DNA, is different among the different conformations. Okay, ZDNA is totally left-handed helix, I have already discussed with you. Okay, and the helix axis rotation starts from major groove. In ZDNA it arises from minor groove. Okay, it starts from minor groove. Okay, so this was about the types of DNA. So just a simple thing they have said, that the A form of DNA is a right-handed helix just like bDNA, and the difference between aDNA and bDNA is that aDNA consists of 11 base pair per turn, and in each base pairing about 20 degree is bending from its own axis. Okay, then Z form of DNA is totally left-handed helix, totally different from the other DNA structures. It consists of 12 base pair per turn, and it somehow moves like a zigzag fashion because they have alternate sugar backbone. They have alternate sugar arrangement. The pentose sugar are arranged in an alternate way, inverted way. Okay, but unlike this, DNA also consists of other unusual structure like triple stranded DNA, then tetra-stranded DNA as well. I will show you the structure. So the triple stranded DNA looks like this. Okay, 3 strands are involved in the DNA, but they are not so much stable because they will repel each other. Okay, so what it's saying about the triple stranded DNA. Triple stranded DNA formation may occur due to additional hydrogen bonding between the bases. So additional hydrogen bonds occur between the bases to form triple stranded DNA, and thus thymine, it has said here in this PDF that thymine can selectively form two hydrogen bonds to the adenine AT base pair. So the adenine base pairing with the thymine occurs on one side, and then again another thymine is forming an hydrogen bond, which is also called as Hoogsteen hydrogen bond with this adenine thymine base pair to form TAT. That is, adenine thymine already are in base pairing with each other. On the other hand, another strand of DNA who have thymine in that position, they are trying to form a hydrogen bond with the adenine thymine base pair, and that bond is called Hoogsteen hydrogen bond. Okay, likewise there is a GC base pairing, okay, 3 by 3 hydrogen bonds, and an additional cytosine of extra strand, it forms a hydrogen bond with the GC and result in formation of CGC hydrogen bonding. Okay, so in this way triple stranded DNA occurs just like this. Now you might think that triple stranded DNA, they are made up of 3 strands, so they are looking like quite stable, but they are not so much stable, because by the way we know that DNA is negative charge because of the presence of the phosphate backbone, and these 3 negatively charged backbones, they always try to repel each other. There is a increased electrostatic repulsion between them that leads them to form less stable. Okay, so triple stranded DNA are not so much stable. Next is unusual type of DNA is the 4-stranded DNA, also called as G quartets and G tetraplexes, depending on what type of arrangement of the strands occur. Now G quartets structure are planar and they are connected by Hoogsteen hydrogen bonds. Just like I have said about the triple helical structure, the G quartets are connected by Hoogsteen hydrogen bonds. There are also anti-parallel 4 DNA strands. That means they are all anti-parallel to each other, just like your double-stranded DNA structure. They are referred to as G tetraplexes. From the figure, you can able to observe that what I am trying to say. So the first figure is the G quartets. You can see all are of same orientation, same polarity, same directionality they have maintained to form G quartets, G tetraplexes from 3' to 5', 3' to 5', 3. They are not alternate with each other. They are not anti-parallel. But in G tetraplexes, you can see that they are anti-parallel with each other, and they are quite more stable than G quartets, the G tetraplex. Okay, you can see there it has formed a bent like structure, like bent DNA. Okay, now these are some unusual structures that we can see in the DNA, that the triple stranded DNA, then 4-stranded DNA like G quartets, where all the strands are oriented in the same direction, and G tetraplexes, where there are 4 anti-parallel DNA strands, 4 DNA strands. Okay, now if you see the ends of the DNA, or if you see the chromosomes, the eukaryotic chromosomes, the ends of the eukaryotic chromosomes consist of telomere-like structure, which are very much rich in guanine, and they actually form this type of G tetraplexes. Okay, so telomeres are found at the end of the chromosome, and we know all that DNA is combining with various proteins like histone proteins to form a coil-like structure called chromatin fibers, which are further condensed to form chromosomes. The end of the chromosomes, obviously it contains DNA, and in that site there consist of telomeres like structure, and these telomeres are protecting the ends of the chromosome from getting degraded. Okay, these telomeres are very much rich in guanine, and in that region mainly forms this type of G tetraplexes that I have shown to you just now. Okay, now these G tetraplexes are very much important. They are gaining importance in treatment of anti-cancer chemotherapies, in recombination of immunoglobulin genes. Okay, different type of applications are there. Okay, now next I am trying to talk you about the denaturation of the DNA. DNA can be denatured by high temperature. Now the process where half of the helical structure of the DNA is lost is called denaturation, and this denaturation can be observed, they can be measured with the help of um, spectrophotometer, which actually with the help of optical density, with the help of absorbance at 260 nanometer wavelength of light, they can able to calculate the temperature at which the DNA has been denatured. Okay, now how we can measure actually the now according to the principles of spectrophotometer, when a light pass through the cuvette where the DNA solution is there, if the DNA is double stranded, they will at least try to absorb that wavelength of light compared to the broken DNA parts. The broken DNA or the denatured DNA where the two strands have been separated apart, they can quite absorb the light efficiently at 260 nanometer. So the reading will be different from the stable DNA. So that's why in a spectrophotometer we can able to observe the denaturation of the DNA. We can able to not observe, we can able to measure the estimated temperature at which the DNA has been lost. Its stability has been lost. Okay, so this is the diagrammatic presentation of how the DNA has been denatured. The two strands has been separated. They are free to absorb the light. So that's why in a spectrophotometer more absorbance is observed at 260 nanometer, because 260 nanometer is the optimal wavelength of light where it can able to absorb. Now we can find out the temperature as well. Now generally the temperature for melting the DNA, for doing the denaturation of DNA, is generally 65 degrees Celsius, because DNA most of them consist of adenine and thymine base pairing. There is a low GC content normally, but suppose if the DNA consists of high guanine cytosine, okay, like for example they have 50% of guanine cytosine, then what will happen? If more guanine cytosine present in the DNA means more hydrogen bonds is present between them, so more temperature will be required to break them, and that's why the temperature will goes on increasing if the DNA consists of rich in guanine cytosine. That's why it is saying that 70% Celsius is required for those DNA to denature them, if that particular DNA have about 50% of guanine cytosine content. So normally denaturation is the process where the DNA's helical property is lost, the hydrogen bonds between the nucleotides has been broken down, but the strand has not been broken. It can be again revert back to normal form, known as a renaturation, or also say as annealing. Annealing is a process where we are slowly cooling down the temperature so that the DNA can again regain that property to become double stranded. Now depending on what temperature the DNA's helical property is lost, that actually we can identify them in spectrophotometer, where at 260 nanometer absorbance of light we can able to calculate the temperature at which the DNA stability is lost, and depending on what amount of guanine cytosine is present in the DNA, the melting temperature, that is the temperature at which half of the helical structure of the DNA is lost, can be different. Generally it is 65 degrees Celsius in case of normal DNA, which have 35% of GC content. But if the GC content is too much high in the DNA, suppose 50% of the DNA consists of guanine and cytosine only, then ultimately your melting temperature become increased, because to break that hydrogen bonds between guanine and cytosine we require more temperature, and that's why the melting temperature get increased with more GC content. So simply melting temperature can be defined as the temperature at which half of the helical property of the DNA structure is lost, and this melting temperature will goes on increasing with the increase in the GC content in the DNA. Okay, now we can also lower down the temperature as well if GC content is high by using certain chemicals like formamide. Formamide destabilize the hydrogen bonds of base pair, and thus they can lower the temperature. Okay, so this was all about the DNA structure, the third video that I have shown to you. Okay, I hope you have able to understand. In the next lecture, video lecture, I will try to discuss with you about the RNA, the types of RNA. Okay, and okay, so that's all for this much. Okay.